My name is Lee Calloway. I'm 32 years old. And 7 months ago, a dead man I had never once met in my life left me everything he owned and blew apart every lie my family had been protecting for 30 years. I wasn't looking for trouble. I was working double shifts at a logistics company, paying rent on a one-bedroom apartment, living small and staying quiet. Normal life. Boring, even. Then a lawyer called on a random Tuesday morning and my entire world stopped making sense. He told me a man named Gerald Harlan had died. He told me I'd inherited 340 acres of farmland in rural Virginia. And then he told me my name was already on the deed. Written there before I was born. My mother knew. I could tell the second I said his name out loud. Her silence was louder than anything she could have said. She had been waiting for this call her whole life. If you're new here, subscribe, hit like, and comment where you're watching from. I read every one. Now let me take you back to where this all began. It was a Tuesday, 7:43 in the morning. I was lacing up my boots getting ready for work when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Unknown number. Virginia area code. I almost let it ring out. I answered on the last ring. A man introduced himself as Douglas Fenn, estate attorney. He spoke carefully. Measured. Like every word had been rehearsed. He told me his client, Gerald Harlan, had passed away 3 weeks prior. No wife. No children. No living relatives on record. And he had left everything to me. I actually laughed. I thought it was a scam. Then Douglas Fenn said, "Miss Calloway, your name is on the original deed. Not added recently. Original ink. Dated 1991. I was born in 1992. I sat down on the floor right there in my kitchen. Boots still in my hand. He gave me 48 hours to respond before the estate entered probate. 340 acres. A farmhouse. 2 outbuildings. Fully owned. No mortgage. I asked him one question. Who is Gerald Harlan? He paused just a little too long before answering. He said, "That's something you'll need to come and find out yourself." I called in late to work. Sat on that kitchen floor for 20 minutes just staring at the wall. Gerald Harlan. I said the name out loud 3 times like it would trigger some memory. Nothing. Not a face. Not a place. Not even a flicker of recognition. I Googled him immediately. Almost nothing came up. A brief obituary in a small Virginia county paper. For sentences long. It said he was 74. It said he farmed land outside a town called Maren's Creek. It said he was private and kept to himself. It said he had no known survivors. No photo. I screenshotted it and stared at it like it would tell me something the words weren't saying. Then I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring, which was normal. But the second I said, "Mom, does the name Gerald Harlan mean anything to you?" she went completely silent. Not the silence of someone thinking. The silence of someone deciding. She said no. She said it too quickly. She said she'd never heard that name in her life. But I heard her breathing change. I'd known my mother for 32 years. I knew every version of her voice. That was her lying voice. I called Douglas Fenn back within the hour. Told him I was coming. He gave me an address for the law office and another address for the farm. He told me to bring 2 forms of ID. He said it like it was routine. Like people inherited land from strangers every other week. I packed a bag that night. I didn't tell my mother I was going. I almost did. I picked up my phone twice. Put it back down both times. Something told me not to. Maren's Creek was 4 hours from where I lived. I left before sunrise. Just me, a travel mug of coffee, and a name I still couldn't place. The further south I drove, the quieter everything got. The highway thinned into 2-lane roads. Trees got taller. Towns got smaller. Gas stations started appearing only every 30 miles or so. And then I saw the first sign for Maren's Creek and my stomach dropped. Not from fear. Something stranger than fear. Familiarity. I had never been to Virginia in my life. I was certain of that. But something about the shape of those hills, the way the tree line broke at the ridge, made my hands tighten on the wheel. I had seen this before. I just couldn't remember where. Douglas Fenn's office was not what I expected. Small building. Older than it looked. A single receptionist who didn't smile when I walked in. She just said, "She's here," into a phone and pointed me down a narrow hallway. Douglas Fenn was in his 60s. Gray suit. Careful eyes. He shook my hand and held it just a second too long, like he was studying me. He laid the deed on the table before I even sat down fully. I looked at my name. Lee and Calloway. Right there. Original ink. Slightly faded but unmistakable. Filed March 14, 1991. My throat tightened. I asked him directly, how did Gerald Harlan know my name before I existed? Fen folded his hands. He said Gerald had been very specific in his instructions. He said Gerald had been planning this for over 20 years. He said there was a letter sealed that Gerald had left specifically for me. He slid it across the table. My name was written on the envelope in handwriting I didn't recognize. Except, and I can't fully explain this, the loops in the letters looked exactly like mine. Same curl on the L, same break in the A. I didn't open it in that office. Something told me I needed to be alone when I did. Fen didn't push me. He just watched me tuck it into my bag with an expression I couldn't read. I sat in my car in that parking lot for a long time. The envelope felt heavier than it should. Just paper. Just ink. But my hands wouldn't move for a full 5 minutes. I finally tore it open. The handwriting was neat. Controlled. Like someone who had written this letter more than once before getting it right. It started with Lee. If you're reading this, I didn't get the chance to find you in time. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for a lot of things. I stopped breathing. He wrote that he had watched from a distance for years. That he had wanted to reach out dozens of times. That something always stopped him. Fear mostly. And a promise he had made to someone he shouldn't have trusted. Then he wrote something that made my vision blur. He said, you were never supposed to be kept from this land. It belonged to your bloodline before it belonged to me. I was only ever holding it. I read that line 4 times. My bloodline. He never used the word family. Never used the word father. Never explained the connection directly. But at the bottom of the letter, below his signature, he had written one additional line in smaller print. It said, ask your mother about the summer of 1990. My mother was 19 in 1990. I called my mother from the parking lot. She answered on the 3rd ring this time. Slower than usual. I didn't ease into it. I just said, Mom, tell me about the summer of 1990. Dead silence. Not 2 seconds. Not 3. A full 7 seconds of nothing. Then she said, where are you right now? Not what do you mean? Not why are you asking? Straight to, where are you? I told her I was in Maren's Creek, Virginia, sitting outside an estate lawyer's office, holding a letter from a dead man who knew my name before I was born. She made a sound I had never heard from her before. Something between an exhale and a cry that she immediately swallowed back down. She said, Lee, don't do anything yet. Just come home. I said, tell me who Gerald Harlan is. She said, please just come home. I said, Mom. And then she said something that cracked everything open. She said, he wasn't supposed to be the one to tell you. I gripped that phone so hard my knuckles went white. He wasn't supposed to be the one. Which meant someone was. Which meant there was a plan. A conversation that had been prepared and rehearsed and deliberately never delivered. 32 years of a story that was never told to the one person who needed to hear it. Me. I didn't go home. I drove to the farm instead. Douglas Fenn had given me a key. Single key on a plain metal ring. No label. Like even that had been kept simple on purpose. The property was at the end of an unpaved road about 6 miles outside town. Trees on both sides the entire way. And then the road opened up and I saw it. 340 acres of open land. A farmhouse with a wide front porch. 2 outbuildings to the east. A tree line at the back that ran along a shallow creek. I sat in my car and stared. That feeling hit me again. Harder this time. I knew this place. Not vaguely. Not almost. I knew the exact angle of that porch. I knew there was a broken slat on the left side of the front steps before I got close enough to see it. There was. I walked the property for almost an hour before I went inside. The land felt familiar under my feet in a way I couldn't explain and stopped trying to. Inside the farmhouse, everything was neat. Intentional. Like someone had prepared it for a specific visitor. On the kitchen table sat a single photograph. I picked it up. A young woman standing on that exact front porch. Maybe 19. Maybe 20. Laughing at whoever held the camera. It was my mother. I stood in that kitchen holding that photograph for a long time. My mother. Young. Happy. Standing on the porch of a farm she told me she'd never heard of. I turned it over. On the back in that same neat handwriting, Eleanor. Maren's Creek. July 1990. My mother's name is Eleanor. I set it down carefully like it might disappear. Then I walked through every room. The farmhouse was modest. Clean. Lived in but not cluttered. Books on shelves. A worn armchair by the window. A kitchen that smelled faintly of cedar and something older underneath. And then at the end of the narrow hallway a door. Padlocked from the outside. Different from every other door in the house. Newer lock on older wood. Someone had added it deliberately. Recently. Fen hadn't mentioned it. I went back to my bag and checked the key ring. One key. I tried it. It opened. The room was small. No window. A single wooden shelf running the full length of one wall. And on that shelf, boxes. 12 of them. Identical. Each one labeled with a year. Starting from 1991. Ending with last year. 32 boxes. One for every year of my life. I opened the first one. Inside, a photograph of me. Newborn. Hospital bracelet still on my wrist. Gerald Harlan had been watching me my entire life. I sat on the floor of that room for I don't know how long. Box after box after box. Every year of my life documented by a man I had never met. First birthday. First day of school. A photograph from my high school graduation taken from a distance, far back in the crowd where I never would have spotted him. He was there. He had always been there. I found newspaper clippings. Report cards somehow. A photograph of my first apartment building taken from the street. Nothing invasive. Nothing threatening. Just witness. Like someone who needed proof that I was okay. Like someone who couldn't be there but refused to be completely absent. My hands were shaking by box 7. By box 12 I was crying, and I don't cry easily. But it wasn't sadness that hit hardest. It was anger. Because in box after box there were envelopes. Sealed. Addressed to me. Letters he had written and never sent. Dozens of them spanning decades. Words he had prepared and packaged and then locked away instead of mailing. He had chosen silence every single time. Someone had made him choose it. I knew who. I pulled out my phone and called my mother again. She answered immediately this time. Like she'd been sitting there waiting. I said just 4 words. I found the room. This time she didn't ask me to come home. This time she just said, I can explain. She talked for 40 minutes straight. I didn't interrupt once. The summer of 1990 my mother was 19 years old and working a seasonal job on a farm in Maren's Creek, Virginia. Gerald Harlan was the owner's youngest son. 22 years old. Quiet. Hardworking. Completely in love with her by August. She said it was real. She needed me to know that first. It was real. By October she was pregnant. She told Gerald immediately. He wanted to stay. He wanted to build something. He had already started putting her name on the deed, both their names, because he said that land was going to belong to their family. But my grandmother found out. My mother's mother was a cold and calculating woman who I had always sensed held some enormous secret. She told my mother that Gerald was wrong for her. Wrong family. Wrong life. Wrong future. She gave my mother an ultimatum. Come home and never speak to Gerald Harlan again, or lose the family entirely. My mother was 19. Alone. Terrified. She came home. She never told Gerald she was pregnant. He found out anyway. Somehow. But by then my grandmother had built a wall so high neither of them could reach the other. So Gerald did the only thing he could. He kept the land. Changed the deed. Put my name on it, the name my mother had already chosen, and he waited. 32 years he waited. I sat in Gerald Harlan's farmhouse until the sun went down. His farmhouse. My farmhouse. I still didn't know what to call it. My mother stayed on the phone with me for a while after she finished talking. Neither of us said much. There wasn't a lot left to say that the silence couldn't hold better. Before she hung up she said, I'm sorry, Lee. I've been sorry every single day. I believed her. It didn't fix anything. But I believed her. I walked back to that locked room and I opened box 32. The last one. The most recent year of my life documented by a man who was already sick when he packed it. Inside was one final sealed envelope. This one wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to whoever I decided to become after I found out the truth. I opened it. He wrote that he wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wrote that he hadn't earned it and wouldn't pretend otherwise. He wrote that the land was never meant to be a gift, it was meant to be a restoration. Something taken from my bloodline returned to it. Then he wrote, don't let anyone make this decision for you. Not your mother. Not a lawyer. Not a single person who stayed silent while you grew up not knowing. This land is yours. It always was. What you do with it is the first truly free choice of your life. I folded the letter. Put it in my jacket pocket. Then I called Douglas Fenn and told him I was keeping it. That was 7 months ago. I still work. I didn't quit my job overnight and ride off into some perfect sunset. That's not how real life works. But every weekend I drive 4 hours south and I walk that land like it's been waiting for me. Because it has. I've been fixing the porch. The broken slat on the left side of the front steps, the one I somehow knew about before I ever got close enough to see it, I replaced that first. I found a neighbor 2 properties over who knew Gerald well. Older man named Patton. He said Gerald talked about me my entire life. Never by name. Just my daughter. That word hit me somewhere I didn't expect. My grandmother passed away 4 years ago. She took her version of events with her, and I've made peace with never hearing it. Some people protect secrets all the way to the end. My mother and I are still finding our way back to each other. It's slow. Some conversations are hard. But she drives down with me sometimes now. She stood on that porch last month and cried in a way she probably should have cried 30 years ago. I let her. Gerald Harlan never got to meet me. I never got to meet him. That loss sits in me quietly, and I don't try to rush it out. But I walk his land every weekend. And I think that counts for something. My name is Lee Calloway. It's on the deed. It was always on the deed. And for the first time in my life, I know exactly who I am. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you're new. And drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were me? I'll see you in the next one.